output is calculated, this time not defined, but calculated as the moving average of actual output. So this is the basis. These are some examples where you can observe, for example, for Italy, you can observe that the change in actual unemployment rate is entirely explained in average by a change in the NIRU, which is the result of what I was saying before. And I want this is adjusting that they do on estimates when they do not hit the expected result. I like it when
this is not working.
Anyway, my results. No wonder that now that recent studies estimate a very relevant impact of the recession of the last years on potential output. No wonder that these results come about, because it is, of course, the effect of the way estimates are normally built. It is interesting that, of course, it doesn't show in the beginning. At the beginning of the crisis, for example, through to 2008, the potential output had a very high trend, and then it started going very down in a few months because moving average takes some time to accumulate the effect of changes in actual values. It is interesting that the causes are sought after for this change in potential output, and the theoretical explanations which can be found are usually on supply factors that should have been affected somehow by this deep recession. For example, the structural NIRU must have increased, and the quality of inputs must have changed, and of course potential T which is a residual, and so can change, can absorb all the unexplained changes. So I come to what I think could be the more uncertain but also constructive part of my teaching. Well, here I list very quickly the characteristics of the relationship between actual and output and potential output. I discussed, you can see it in demand-led growth theories, endogeneity of resources, the difference between observed underutilization and unobserved underutilization, because once the economy realizes some potential, then some output, then it affects the way in which potential is built in the future. So there is something that could have been produced which never materialized in an economy. So there are various concepts of potential, but what you can hope to measure is only the short period potential, the potential in a given situation when you have some things which are known, which are given. And of course that the normal utilization part is not an attractor of the actual utilization part. These are consequences of the way in which the relationship should be, in my opinion, seen between actual and potential output, but dependent, which is what I was saying before, and the fact that observed output gaps need not be symmetrical. Now, the problem is that what can we do with these principles as regards empirical analysis? I believe that we can, of course, calculate a statistical trend of actual output. We can do it very easily, as everybody else does. And probably this should be distinguished from the calculus of potential short period output. because of the fact that output gaps need not be symmetrical. Although in the long period, so when the period is historically long, maybe we can say that the moving average of what is realized more or less approximates what we could have done, but simply because what we could have done is strongly influenced by what we have really done. And still more uncertain, these are my questions for the audience. If we should go back, let's dream that we go back to open estimates. What is wrong with open estimates of potential output? Well, the most probably striking characteristic is the arbitrary quantification, as I said before, of the inflationary constraint of the minimum value of the unemployment rate. I don't know how it is possible to estimate it, to quantify it. I don't think that it is an historically determined magnitude, that there is no single numerical value which is always valid for. But in this connection, I think that some reflections on the output-inflation relationship can be made. For example, what happens below the inflationary ceiling when unemployment rate is above the minimum? Keynes, in chapter 21 of the general theory, described some positions of semi-inflation, and he referred to the variations in the wage unit before full employment was reached. So the idea is that there is no symmetry between inflation, true inflation, which is what happens when the unemployment rate is below the critical value, while in the other part we don't know what happens, and that can be inflation, so a rise in the wage unit, semi-inflation, not high inflation, but change in prices and unemployment. Inflation cannot be considered as an equilibrating mechanism, but why? First, because they probably do not operate the mechanisms, we can criticize the mechanisms through which, for example, now models believe that inflation and deflation adjust output towards the natural level. But the problem is that the adjustment mechanism is made of two parts. First, if there is a reaction of inflation of prices to output, and second, whether this reaction of prices to output has some effect on output. I believe that we can define in Keynes analysis, as also reinterpreted in the long period, that we can define situations